Greetings, everyone, and welcome to this podcast. This is part 2 of a 3-part series that's looking at the challenges facing organizations today as they attempt to widen their governance stance. Access management continues to evolve and encompass new requirements and new capabilities. So, our practices, our processes, and our solutions have to evolve as well. I'm Chris Williams, a business solutions manager with Avexa Software. We enable organizations to ensure only the right people have appropriate access capabilities to your most precious commodities, your information and your data. In today's portion of the podcast series, we're going to take a look at the growing charter of access governance. And what that really means is, well, where we're taking access governance as far as interacting with other disciplines, both in IT and from the business. Maybe what we need to do when we start looking at this particular topic is to come up with a common understanding or definition of what access governance is. And when you strip all of the surrounding information away from it, what you really get down to is a set of processes or set of capabilities that we use to request, provision, review, and govern not just the user identities, but also the entitlements that they have access to throughout the enterprise, be them systems, applications, structured data, unstructured data, what have you, right? But it's a holistic set, an integrated set of processes that allows us to determine who has access to what. Pretty straightforward. Now, a lot of organizations take this definition set, and one of the things that they like to do is come up with some basic questions to try to figure out where they are today and what they're doing. What's really neat is when you can take a series of interrogatives such as these and begin to prioritize them. Might be a nice little exercise to do in-house, right? Figure out how well we're doing stuff, what we need to do better, what our risks are if we don't do something immediately. So you come up with a list, and it's, like project management 101 here. Figure out what the biggest risk is and what the larger benefits are, come up with some prioritized stacks, and begin working down your access governance solution set to figure out where your holes are, where your gaps are, or better yet, what you're really doing fantastically today that you can leverage throughout other neighboring disciplines. So let's say that you've gone through the exercise, you know what you need to focus on, but you need to kind of change the context and figure out also what kind of return am I getting. And I don't want to use the terms like return on investment or total cost of ownership or total economic impact, but we need to figure out from business terminology, what are we going to get for our efforts here? And when we think about access governance, there's kind of like 5 basic areas that we can focus on that show really great results. And we can do some alignment from our prioritization activities into this. It might be about being able to have better optics into the data, into the users, into the ownership, something that we need to foster. That might also have something to do with automation, right? Getting this information for us, which would have, go figure, a direct relation to the cost of doing identity and access governance projects, right? The more we automate, the less it should cost us. We can also do things more efficiently from a time point of view. Also, what we can figure out is some of the risk factors that are out there, right? This is coming from the prioritization part as well, that we can lower. So we can figure out where some possible danger zones are. And of course, what we want to do is show a shift in how we do things from today to how we want to do things to tomorrow. And that might be moving from just, let's say, stagnant periodic reviews into a continuous compliance-based review process. You can think of it as moving towards exception-based analysis. So when things come up in real time, I take care of them now rather than waiting for a view that comes up every 60 days. And the last thing, of course, from a business point of view, is to make people more efficient, right? And that we can do through an easier set of solutions, something that, again, consolidates all of my review practices and processes, my governance, my policy definitions, all in one environment that makes sense because it's all interoperative, which goes back to, oddly enough, increasing our visibility, right? Because it's all there. So, we can do some alignment here between the practices, where our risks are, our prioritizations, and what our drivers are. Let's start off with the first area of integration points. And this is security information and event management. Again, I said what we wanted to focus on today is where we're taking identity and access governance, because it's been around for a while, and now we want to expand what we're doing. And this is one of the areas that has come to the forefront that a lot of organizations are addressing today or hope to address in the near term. The information that we get presented through security tools and event management tools really helps us to better identify some of the things that we need to do better in our organizations. And in order to do that, we need a set of capabilities from our SIEM solution set that drive, again, towards some tangible results. Now, one of the interesting things here is we're looking at the capabilities, is that when we start thinking about this and then add the words such as correlation, well, that's been a holy grail for IT for quite a while, between IT and the business. So maybe if we start taking a look at some basic capabilities, we can cut to the chase here and really put in a simplistic security information event management tool set that drives some very basic expectations for governance specifically, rather than thinking larger from security. And with that, once we start really refining what we want from a capability set, then we can go ahead and specify some goals that we want to target. Maybe it is that we want dashboards, we want some real-time information, we want to be able to retain all of our historical data so we can do patterning and trending and that kind of stuff. So I would say take your time, pick a few goals, align them with some very specific capabilities, and then create an SIEM management subset that feeds governance specifically. And I think you'll get some better results like that. One of the other things you want to do is make sure that whatever we do, we measure it, right? So we need some metrics put into place. You, I'm sure, have got a lot of metrics that you've been measuring since, well, the early days of compliance came up. And we can reutilize some of that information, but then again, we can also shift over to some new metrics that have maybe surfaced in the past 2 or 3 years as governance practices have become more routine. So we know that there are some things that we can improve on from a practice and process and cost point of view, and we can put this into our new SIEM project set. And lastly, what we want to think about is integration itself of SIEM data. Maybe what we want to do is leverage some identity management activities that are instigated through events. Maybe what we want to do is think from an operational point of view, maybe some IT service management things we want to do, like we want to make sure that incident tickets are open at the help desk, and that once we have some trending in place, we know that we can escalate that incident into a problem because it's reoccurring, right? Puts the right spotlight on things. So we can start thinking about SIEM and access governance as triggers for integration points throughout the IT operational practice set. And that's a cool thing, because then business and IT really are working well together to solve some common problems, okay? Joining together. Another area that we want to take a look at is data governance. And more specifically, what we want to think about is both structured data, like from applications and databases, things of this nature, with unstructured data, like file shares, SharePoint systems, whatever they are, and putting in a set of processes that treat both of them the same, right? Take away that exclusionary separation that says, well, this is unstructured data and I need a different set of tools to do this. Why not take on the position that maybe what I'd rather do is break down some of the challenges around ownership, around people that have responsibility for that data, for the changes that take place on an unstructured field, and loop those back into standard processes and practices that I have for structured data, right? Break down those walls. If you put in a tool set that can get to it, that can see it, that can pull those entitlements and those informational resources in, then we should be able to set up a standard set of practices that allows all of our entitlements to be treated equally, which removes a lot of complications. And that's the goal here, making it simple. And we're going to touch on that tag at the end as well. So if we're thinking about all of that unstructured data that's out there, and we're talking about big data, I think maybe one of the top 10 requirements that we're looking at, and it's the first one here, is a scalable architecture. If you can't scale, if you can't handle an enterprise-wide girthy set of data that does exist in your enterprise today, you're not going to get very far when you try to address that unstructured data point of view. So let's start off with the basics, the underpinnings, the mechanism that make it happen. Make sure that it can address the scope of data that you need to bring in and manage. Then once you can do that, then the other elements of the top 10 requirements kind of fall in line here, right? Ownership and accountability. Well, that's easy because I can see it now because I've got it all. Putting some remediation practices in place, right? And that's easy because now it's not an exception. It's like, well, we can manage all this stuff because we've got it in our repository, we know what it is, except for this handful over here. No, Bring it all in. Treat it the same. Okay? So where are we going to start here? Okay, let's start off with 6 basic things for governing data. First thing that I was talking about when we were talking about enterprise scalability, that gives us the ability to have optics, right? And optics to me means something very specifically. It's the ability not only to see that data, but to have the right lenses applied to that data when you bring it in. So you can have the right ownerships defined, the right levels of classification against the data, making sure that the right people are unified or oriented as far as group affiliation and access points, that sort of stuff. So once we bring it in, let's make sure that whatever processes we put in place, we have the tools that allow us to see the nuances of the data that we're examining. Okay? From there, then what we want to do is be able to assign the right responsibilities, the right ownership. Let's move away from large, generic, group-based definitions of owner. Let's make it more specific, and let's use the business to define what that ownership level should be. After all, it's their data. They kind of know what it's all about. They can put the standards in place. Okay. After we do that, then we can go ahead and move into using that data. And that means for our business community, making sure that they've got the right reports available to them, something that IT would not have to do extracts for each time they want to see something, maybe give them dashboards, the ability to do ad hocs, custom field, that sort of thing. Then the business owns it, the business knows it, the business is reporting on it, we can apply the right rules. And we can start off with the same set of rules that we have for our structured data. Maybe we're talking about separations of duties, we're talking about toxic combination rules, we're talking about mutual exclusivity, we could also be talking about periodic access policies, whatever that may be, but we can put those rules into place for unstructured data as well. No reason to keep it different. Then, here's the great thing. We get rid of the mystery that sits behind managing this data, right? And that simply means let's get rid of the rocket science, make it easy to use, easy to manage, easy to see, and more importantly, keep the management of unstructured data simplistic. There's a lot of it there, right? And unless the business community knows, not just feels, but knows that there is a tool set they can utilize to help them see the data, manage that data, review it, attest to it, recertify it, they're not going to use it if it's not simple. So we have to make sure that it is a simple process for them. Then lastly, when we're talking about unstructured data, again, not uncommon to structured, make sure that if we see an anomaly, if we see an exception, we see a vulnerability, that we have the tools in the management optics environment, as we're seeing it, to make changes, right? If there's an exception, fix it. Don't think that we should have a secondary solution set, an IT-driven solution set that we have to go to make these changes. Once we see a conflict or an exposure within that unstructured data, we should be able to instigate a remediation process at that time. This eliminates latency, and more importantly, it also eliminates the possibility that we forget to get to that secondary tool to make those changes. So it's got to be an actionable environment. Now let's move on to another area that everybody's talking about, and that's cloud. I'm not going to get into the hyperboles of cloud and the validities of it or the possible dangers. What I want to talk about is how we treat data that lives in the cloud. And I'm hearing this more and more often with organizations that I am speaking to on a regular basis, and that is just because the data doesn't live in our data center, on our race floor, doesn't mean that we should not treat that data with the same levels of respect. That might mean moving away from what traditional cloud providers are used to giving us. And I'm not slamming them. It's just that this is the way that the industry is evolving. You know, everything was based on that SLA with some penalty clauses and things like that. But I think we need to get more explicit in our expectations from our cloud providers. So we better understand how the data is managed, who has access to it, not just on our side, but from the provisioner side as well. Okay? You need to start thinking more holistically because there is a great deal of risk. Not more so because it's not in our location, but just because there's more data and it's distributed, and we need to think along those lines, right? Data lives everywhere. It's very fluidic now. Data is passing from endpoints everywhere. We don't even want to get into the mobility side of the world for that conversation, but we need to really start thinking about fluidic data and what that means. It's information that's transient. It's information with multiple residencies. It's information that can be downloaded, which can be downloaded to any device, anywhere, anytime, based on a subscription use. So we have to really think about the risk elements as we apply a cloud governance, cloud data governance plan. Now, like I said, I'm not going to get into all the different iterations. It's not an education on cloud, but think about it. There's public clouds, there's infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service. There's a lot of different elements to what cloud and cloud data can be. So I think we really need to go back and think about how we address the written agreement. Not just penalty clauses, but what is really going on as far as access, use of access, provisioning, deprovisioning, access for certification, review, attestation processes, all that sort of thing. Let's figure out what it is. Let's get it down in writing so that when we go to do our tasks for governance, that we aren't surprised at the end that, oh, this is something we can't achieve. Also, what we might want to think about is that there are some security processes or some tools or some practices that are quite appropriate for specific types of cloud services. So let's think about what those are and make sure that those are included as part of our governance plan to protect the data, not just to act on it once it's been violated, right? A little bit proactive. And then what we also want to think about is, there are some standards out there that we can leverage, be they SAML or even like the Extensible Access Control Markup language that helps us to do a better job of provisioning according to policy for our access programs. And, you might want to use that combination of role, rule, and attribute definitions for who gets access to cloud-based data. Something to think about. And on the back end of all this, we also want to leverage the intellect that has already gone into defining standards. CSA is a great resource. If you guys aren't familiar with them, go take a peek at some of the information being produced. It is specifically aligned to cloud solutions, data solutions, security for those environments. And there are some practices that are already being promoted from the standards committee for some regulatory acts that are out there or some other process standard frameworks. But go ahead and leverage the community, right? There's other people doing this. You're not alone. Get some help. Talk to your peers. Find out what's going on. And find the easiest path. Maybe that's what it is. Find the easiest path to define your standards internally, right? Because there's a lot of smart people out there doing fantastic work, and we should leverage that whenever possible. The last thing that I want to touch on is closed loop governance. I love the term closed loop because it is cyclical, and it does mean that we're going from A all the way to Z in a good, solid process, right? Maybe what we want to think about is like the standard predecessor-successor relationship, almost a Gantt approach to doing governance. Now, there are some obstacles that we've come in the past that we've come across, and that was kind of like mostly dependent upon our technology's abilities at the time to do full closed-loop processes, whether we're talking about a remediation event notification that leads us all the way down to getting a CAB-approved change because an application has a hole in it that allows this kind of thing to take place, right? So we need to think really, really large when we look at closed-loop governance, but we want to keep it simple again. Remember, just because you can define 600 steps doesn't mean that that's the most efficient or effective way of doing something. Maybe your closed-loop practices only needs 5 steps. So let's think about how to do this simply. Think about 3 basic buckets that we want to talk about. So access request is really big, just because, like I was saying earlier, on a remediation process for unstructured data, if I notice that there's a problem, I want to take care of it right then and there. Okay, I don't want to jump to 15 different areas. Access request is a really, really important factor in making that happen. From the tables, from the solution set that I notice a change has to take place, I want to be able to make that request to make it happen in stream, in process, with other things that I'm doing. I also then want to be able to think about how we take that request and push it all the way through governance change processes. You can call this workflows, you can call it manipulation of process set, you can call it integrated, holistic, a lot of great words to describe it, but basically it's making sure that when you make that request that you have the appropriate avenues of automation standing behind you to push a change through to finally get to a fulfillment stage, whether we're talking about making sure it's just a notification process, seeking approval for a change, or having the tools to actually instigate that change from the governance solution that you're using for the attestation process all the way over into an install or an executable factor, right? Make sure that you can push it across. And if you can push it across, then the important thing to think about is, well, when I'm pushing it, where am I pushing it to, and what am I doing? And does that make sense? If we're talking about security events that we want to notice, or if we're talking about remediation, maybe we want to make sure that we can integrate with an IT service management solution and instigate the opening of incident tickets, something like that. Or the incidents of opening up a change request, because it's application-based, not just this one ID-based. So we need to think about, again, those closed-loop activities that go all the way down from recognition to remediation to fulfillment, and then lastly to verification. If I'm doing a process, I want to make sure it actually happened. So those are 4 areas that are on the immediate horizon for access governance and access governance practitioners, what they're doing today. For more information, you can contact Avexa at any one of the locations located here on the screen, or you can come visit us on our web at www.avexa.com. I'm Chris Williams, a Business Solutions Manager for Avexa Software. Thanks so much for joining us today for part 2 in this 3-part series, and I hope you join us for the 3rd part when we take a look at what the horizon has in store for us for a new identity access-based framework approach. Thank you very much.